Here we go. All right. Now we're recorded. All right. So jumping into the icebreaker questions, if you could be any place in the world right now, where would you be?
Probably Barcelona or Costa Rica.
Okay. Good answer. Haven't been to either one, but I've heard good things. Um,
Yeah.
what has been one of the most important lessons you have learned?
I think that I'm here to forgive myself and heal and just continuously learn and grow. And also, and this is kind of a new one, experience all the joys of life.
That's so simple, but so beautiful. Thank you.
And to
What?
be curious. I'm going to add that. And to be curious, like about myself, question myself. I'll kind of talk about this later. But yeah, to be curious
Yes.
about myself and life.
Yes. Great way to set us up for the conversation coming up. What scares you the most? What is your biggest fear?
Um, some bugs. If I'm being honest, I think, but no, I think I used to answer death. And then through a lot of the work that I've done, I've kind of like overcome that. But I think now my biggest fear is not being in alignment with myself or like choosing a path that leads me away from becoming my best self.
Yeah, that's powerful, by the way. If you could have a superpower, what would it be?
I think either to fly or to just transport myself anywhere immediately.
Okay. Yes, same. I
Like with a
agree.
snap or, something.
It would save so much money on travel.
Yeah. Or magic just in general. Like that all sounds great.
Yes, yes. And then a last question. So get ready for it. What are you doing right now that is changing the world?
I think if you would have asked me this a year or so ago, my answer would have been a little different.
Mhm.
But today I'm healing myself and trying to be so much myself that I inspire others or give them permission to be themselves. Show compassion to myself and others, and just trying to share the things I've learned, like kind of like what we're doing today.
That's awesome. Thank you. I hope all of you got to learn a little bit more about Lo in just a fun little way. But now we're just going to dive right into today's topic. Well, actually, before we do that, Lo, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who are you? What all do you do? You do so many fantastic things. So just feel free to blow us all away.
Okay. Oh, well, I don't know about that, but you can definitely read my bio. So I'm going to keep it kind of short. I grew up in Pennsylvania. I swam and played water polo through college, had to retire due to injuries. Post college, started working at GE. And I was like, something is just off. I don't know what is going on. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I sought out help. And then I moved all over the place and worked for a bunch of startups, have started my own company, have been consulting on and off for a number of years. And yeah, mostly now I focus on business consulting and life coaching and mindset coaching. But I also, as many of you know, dabble in film production. My co-producer, Aaron Atkinson, I don't know if he's on right now, but we just did a series called Taste Exchange, and that was super fun. And yeah, that's kind of me really quick.
And I have to give everyone on the call right now, if you have not seen Taste Exchange, it's on YouTube. It is phenomenal. Aaron and Lo have done a phenomenal job at it. I will try to go and find a link quickly to put it in the chat, but it is amazing. So everyone should definitely check it out if you can.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. So for the folks here who may not understand this concept of autopilot, I guess that's a good way to start is just defining what autopilot is. Just explain, give us kind of the rundown on what autopilot is.
Yes. And also, please, as Jasmine said, feel free to chat in questions if you don't understand something I'm saying. If you are like, oh, yeah, like that's happened to me or whatever, like we want this to be interactive. And the second thing is, before I dive into this, so I wanted to share, I'm not a neuroscientist. I don't have that degree, but I learned a lot of this information through my basic and advanced Psych K trainings, and also through the teachings of Dr. Bruce Lipton. He is a stem cell biologist, and he wrote The Biology of Belief. Super interesting dude. Happy to share any references, because I'm going to share some things that you might be like, whoa, like, how do you know that? But happy to share all that information after. But autopilot, essentially, so what it comes down to is that if you're not actively directing your brain or giving it a place to go, it will just direct you based on the programs you already have. And there's two parts to our brain. There's the conscious and the subconscious. The conscious brain runs at like 40 bits per second. The subconscious brain runs at 40 million bits per second. That's insane, right? So conscious brain is like creative, personal identity, spirituality, things like that. Subconscious is everything else. It's our creative mind. I'm sorry, it's our breathing, it's our blood flow, it's our programs, it's how we react in those immediate situations, right? And so to really learn how to get off autopilot, which we're going to start later, is understanding that like your beliefs and all of these programs that we have in our subconscious direct our life. Essentially, they control how we respond to things. They control our perceptions, our biases, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And in birth to age 7, we are all subconscious brain. So you are just get everything you're seeing and experiencing. You're there, obviously, but you're just getting programs, and everything you see gets downloaded as a program. So, and really to illustrate the difference between conscious and subconscious mind, like think of subconscious mind like a tape recorder, right? Like that's essentially what it is. Creative mind is like, oh, I read this thing, I read this quote, it's super cute, it's cool. Conscious mind doesn't work that way. So that's why if you read a book or an article about weight loss or becoming a millionaire, you don't do it immediately, because your conscious brain just reads it and it's like, okay, yeah, cool. But it doesn't necessarily get stored in your subconscious, because your subconscious doesn't care about the story. It cares about the repetition and whatever loop you have playing. So that's why we're not all like, this isn't my quote, but that's not why we're not millionaires and supermodels, right? Like we need more. Okay, so all of that being said about subconscious brain, conscious brain, the other very important thing is that from that time frame, from 0 to 7, studies have found that 70% of the programs we get that get downloaded into our subconscious are not helpful, they're self-sabotaging, and they're disempowering. 70%. That is crazy. Before you go and like blame your parents, don't blame your parents. It's part of society, right? It's part of how we've all kind of evolved, if you will. And some of the things that we have used to help us, like fear being a real thing. Like you have to run from this animal right now, or you're running out of food, or if you were ostracized from your tribe, you will die, right? So there's a lot of old kind of things that came in, and then just how society is kind of shifted and grown over time. And we haven't dropped some of these old programs, and we didn't really know or haven't been taught emotional and mental health skills, right? And we didn't really fully understand how the brain works until more recently. And science is literally just catching up to some ancient wisdom that's out there. So it's all super interesting stuff. Any questions before I go into biases? Because I know that was a lot.
Is David, is that your cue that you have a question that you turn back on your camera? Nope, no questions. Just
No,
kidding.
that was my cue. That much.
Okay, just kidding. No questions.
Okay. Do you have a question?
No
Or
question.
should I? Okay. So the next part is bias. So understanding how your patterns all kind of come into form biases, right? And a bias is a preference or an inclination. especially one that inhibits impartial judgment. So they come from society and our brains that want to associate things together, right? Like if we go back to when we were in tribes and roaming about, like, oh, Susan ate a red berry. Her name probably wasn't Susan, but go with it. Like she ate a red berry and she died, right? Like, okay, don't eat red berries. Like red berries equal death, right? Like now that's funny, but at a certain time that was real. So I'll just kind of give you some more examples of biases. Women can't drive. Asians can't drive. Asians are good at math. You can have biases that are, in the positive as well. A bias can be someone only hiring women or someone only hiring men. Political bias can be disagreeing with someone who's in the opposite political party as you, literally just because they're in the opposite political party. Racial bias, right? Or prejudice is assuming like Black people are lazy or all Muslims are terrorists. Like what? Like those things, like and most people hopefully aren't thinking those anymore, but these come all the time and they've come through all the time in our society. There's also bias towards same-sex couples, right? So I actually saw this post on LinkedIn and I want to share not the post, but kind of like what I saw in it. It was a restaurant in Texas and they posted their logo like that was with a pride flag. And they said, y'all means all are welcome here. And they've been getting a lot of backlash because of that, unfortunately. And it was really interesting. And I try not to do this because there's usually not a lot of good shit in comments, but LinkedIn, there's some good stuff sometimes. But there was a guy that commented, he was a white male. And he, no offense, white males, just describing this gentleman. And he said, why can't we have a day or a month for male-female couples that are religious? And first of all, before I talk about this, like, I don't have anything against heterosexual couples or religion. I'm fully in favor of embracing who you are, and we should all be celebrated, right? And I think that's kind of the root cause of a lot of these bias problems. But this guy, like, this is just a perfect example of how bias comes into play. If you take a step back and understand America and many other Western cultures are set up through traditionally Christian religions and opposite sex or heterosexual couples. So society is literally set up to support that. Everything. Tax benefits when you get married, the American dream, like go to college, get married, buy a house, have kids, 2.2 kids or whatever the national average is now, whatever. And then Christmas and Easter being national holidays, right? Like what other religions have national holidays other than those? So it's just understanding a little bit more about the biases. And that goes into like a lot of the stuff that's been happening in the past year, just recognizing our biases towards different groups, like looking at Columbus Day and what that really means. And so it's not saying, hey, we need to stop society and burn it all down. It's taking the time, like true change is going to come from taking the time to think about the things in your life you take for granted that are not norms for other people, like wheelchair ramps going into a public business or subtitles for text on videos, right? For me, I've never had to worry about the color of my skin when I've gone shopping, like unfortunately a lot of my friends have had, which is so sad. And I wish that wasn't a thing, but I haven't had to worry about that in this country because of my race or ethnic background. So that's kind of like bias when we're thinking about people and our society. There's also ways that we have bias in different ways. So like confirmation bias, whatever you believe, you will look for evidence to support that. So even if you're thinking it is so hard to lose weight or nothing good ever happens to me or yard work is such a chore, you will literally find things just to support that. Like that is how our brains work, right? There's also the halo effect bias. And I'm sure this has happened to you. It's not a bad thing. It's just to become more aware of when you meet someone and you're like, oh my gosh, or like, David, you went to Queen City College, or I don't think you did, but you have that sweatshirt on. But it's like, oh my gosh, you must be amazing, right? So it's like, oh, I know one thing about you. That means you automatically are just awesome all around. Like you're a great person. There's also the opposite effect, the horns effect, which I just learned about this one actually. It's if you learn one thing about someone and just automatically like take them as a negative. So if someone speaks slowly, you assume they're not intelligent, and you just kind of like write them off. So there's all kinds. One more I have here is conformity bias, doing things because everyone else is doing them. And that's kind of like where fear plays a factor as well. So if you are interested, and I have a link here, I'm going to share with you guys. Harvard has an implicit bias test. It's really interesting. They have it for a lot of things. They have it for gender, race, religion, disability, age, sex, weapons, which I was like, that's interesting, and lots of other things. So if you're interested, please check that out. The last thing I want to say on autopilot, and I know we're spending a lot of time here, but it's super important to understand how we get here, because then that will inform how we change it. Autopilot also means making the same decisions in your life over and over and over, from what you do on the weekends, the route you drive to work, the gym, the grocery store, those decisions that you're making. And the question is, are you repeating the same types of things every year? Or are you growing? Are you getting stuck on repeat? Are you trying something new? And I'm not saying that means like, oh my gosh, go quit your Bank of America job now or anything. The real question is, how are you making yourself uncomfortable on a normal basis?
Yeah. That's all super powerful stuff. And if anything, I'm like really interested to take the Harvard study test as well. So you definitely have to send that out after we all hop off the call.
Yeah, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So to kind of transition more into, how you realized you were on autopilot, what was the decision factor for you to realize like, hey, I am stuck in these habits. I'm stuck on autopilot. Like what made you realize it? And what made you decide like, I don't want to live this way anymore. I don't want to live based off of the status quo or live day to day doing the same exact things. What sparked that in you?
Yeah, so interesting that you asked that, because my best friend was recently in town and she kind of asked me something similar, not like same wordage, but at the end of the day asking like, what made you get a life coach? Because after college, I mentioned I was working at GE and I was like, something felt off, and I reached out to this woman and I was like, I don't know. I can't remember what I was like. I just knew something was off. I didn't feel good. Was in a depression. Now I know this. Wouldn't have called it that at the time. Just had, and I found, oh my gosh, I found this letter. She was asking me and I was like, oh, I wonder like when, and I was like searching my email, and I've had the same email for a long time. Well, at least one of them. And so I like looked to the intake form I sent my coach, which was like 10 years ago. And I was like super low self-esteem. Like my answers, it was so crazy to read, just the mind space that I was in at that time. And I had so much compassion for myself just to say like, wow, like, holy shit, I'm so proud of you for getting help. And I feel that way towards anyone. But reaching out was one of the best things that I ever did. She was also a psychotherapist, which is super helpful. And a friend of mine had seen her and just said, oh my gosh, she's amazing, and she wasn't like, oh, go check her out. I think I reached out later and I was like, hey, can you did you like that person? What did you know about them? Can you tell me about her? But that was a huge pivotal moment in my life. And at first I was like, oh my gosh, she's changed my life. And then I was like, no, I've changed my life. Like that framing is very important for us to understand, because I was talking to a friend about this at lunch today. No one can change your life for you. You have to, some people can inspire you, people can support you, they can uplift you, but at the end of the day, no one can actually do it for you. So you're the one that has done it. I think I also talked about that with Sam Dominich in a Taste Exchange episode. But so that was the first time. And then honestly, it's definitely happened to me more times in my life. I mean, I've been in jobs where I'm doing the same thing. Oh my God, this is crazy. Like literally nothing has changed and it's been a year. And so that's where I've made decisions to do something new or, just shift in a different way. Again, it doesn't mean like, oh, you need to quit your job. It's like, oh, maybe you can learn something new, right?
So I have a question that's a little bit that's a little less related to your own personal experience, but just hearing you say just getting off of autopilot. I don't want people to think that what we're trying to say is like habits are not healthy, or doing the same thing, like if that's your comfort zone, then so be it. Like, what is your opinions on the folks that they have the personality types that they have to be very routine, they have to have those habits, they have to have things kind of in order? Do you think that this conversation still pertains to folks like that? Is it just in a different way? Like, what are your thoughts as far as those specific type of people?
Yeah, I honestly, I think it pertains to everyone, right? It's being curious. It is making yourself uncomfortable, because if you don't, you will get stuck in a repeat pattern. And that doesn't mean, oh, throw everything out and don't, have structure. I think structure is one of the best things that anyone can have in their life, because it actually allows you more freedom and flexibility, but that's another talk. Um, but yeah, to me, it comes down to just introducing something different into your life. So if you need routine, cool. But like, can you introduce a new language? And we are going to kind of transition into like, how do you start getting off of autopilot? But it's not saying like, turn your life upside down. It's saying, what's one thing you can do different? If you've been doing the same thing for like 3 years in all aspects of your life, or pretty much the same, right? You're like, oh, I took a vacation this year. Like, okay, that's not the same thing.
Hmm.
like challenge yourself on something. That's what we're talking about. And when it comes to the subconscious brain. Oh, so I don't know if anyone saw, like anyone that's on saw this, but I posted like, learn how to use 10% or learn how to use more than 10% of your brain, right? That's a very common myth that is out there right now. If we have time at the end, I'll explain why, like, that's not true. We have access to the full capacity of our brain. We have access to 100% of it. However, we may not be activating it, right? Because when you do things over and over and over, you're just using the same neural patterns, right? So say like I have a routine and like these are my neural patterns I have, right? I have 5 patterns, they fire every day. These are the things that happen. So truly, like, I'm not using all of my brain. I'm just using these 5 neural patterns. When you do something different though, you create possibilities, you create new connections. And so that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about creating new neural patterns, actually using more of your brain. And at the end of the day, and this is one of the things I'm committed to, is like being committed to lifelong growth and learning. That's it.
Yes. Yes, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that this journey is not just something that you're going to do once and you're just going to feel so much better. You're going to feel liberated. It's just going to
Yeah.
be done. I'm going to be the best me in the world, right? It's all about continuing on the journey, because just and I don't think it's easy as at all, but just thinking about getting to that point, the mental work that it takes to get to the point to where you are getting yourself off of autopilot. Imagine the mental power that it takes for you to engage in that, and think of the mental power that it's going to take for you to just unlearn it all, right? So it's a lot easier for us to fall away from it than it is for us to reprogram our brain. So it is so important that everyone understands that this is a lifelong journey, and you're going to have to keep doing it. You're gonna have to keep on this journey. It's never gonna stop. So get
Yes.
ready, everyone. It's a
Yeah,
lifelong
no,
journey.
it's so true. Yeah, again, it comes back to like, oh, I read a book and like now I'm a millionaire, right? Or like, oh, I read a book and like now I have all the neural programs, like I'm good to go. Like that's not how it works. And I loved Ernest's
Mhm.
comment. It's a good point. We should feel uncomfortable when we're growing, expanding. I saw something. I think Mel Robbins posted this the other day. It was like, would you rather be uncomfortable and stuck or uncomfortable and growing? It's not like, oh, I'm stuck, like everything's great here, right? When you're just doing the same things over and over again, because that leads to complacency. And then I believe that like continued complacency can lead to laziness, right? And then again, was having this conversation with a friend over lunch, and it came up that like someone said, oh, well, I'm just that way, or like things have always been that way. And it's like, what? Like, that's bullshit. Like, no, like that's a really bad answer.
Erin put in the chat, which I definitely want to see you expand on this. We average about 18,000 thoughts a day. Typically, 80% of them are negative in nature. That to me is just so intriguing because Erin, fun fact, I would have considered myself, I don't know, a couple months ago as a natural born pessimist, just someone that was always just in the dumps, just negative all the time. Everything that could go wrong will happen. So, it's so interesting that you say that. So low, first, what are your initial thoughts on that? And second, how do we combat those negative thoughts in our brain to where we're no longer just sitting in like this like pessimistic negative cloud all day? Like,
yeah, no. And like what Erin put in there, 18,000 versus 8 to 80%, it's the same, right? It's the same as we talked about at the beginning, that 70% of your subconscious programs on average are negative, right? So of course, 70 or 80% of your thoughts are going to be negative. Like, it's not like, oh, like I could just change them, with my conscious brain, which runs at 40 bits per second versus 40 million. Like, what? That's like saying, oh, I am a person walking and I can keep up with a rocket ship. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. So yes, like I totally agree with that. I think the first step is you have to take ownership. It's not about what happened to you. It's not about playing the victim. If you want to actually get out of that, you have to take ownership and decide that you want to heal and grow and learn, and that you want to make the rest of your life the best of your life. That is in essence, like the people that sit around and talk about like, oh, the old good old days. And I miss high school. And I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing now? Like, tell me. I know, thank you for laughing at my voices, my impressions. But I think that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing is we have to have awareness, right? We have to have awareness of those thoughts that we're thinking of, the thoughts that come up. And then we can start to recreate and change them, right? So it's having an open mind, saying like, okay, like, oh, questioning that, like, that's interesting. And Jasmine and I were talking before you guys got on. And it's about, instead of becoming the thinker of the thoughts, becoming the observer of the thoughts. So stepping back, like, oh, I'm having this thought right now. And I heard something a couple months ago that was really cool. That was like, narrate your life. If you're having trouble, I think specifically it was someone who was struggling with weight, and they're like, oh, I like go and eat late night meals and whoever was talking to them was like, narrate your life. Like, Lo is going to the refrigerator right now and about to pull out some, or maybe the ice cream in the freezer, because the ice cream doesn't go in the refrigerator, but you know what I'm saying. So you can just start to narrate your life. And that is one way to help. Determining what you want is very important. So after you have the awareness, it's funny that David just said neural patterns, because I was going to recommend that for people at the end. Binaural beats. No, that's what I was going to say. Anyway, so yeah, having an open mind, determining what you want, like what are your core values, what are your goals? Those things are very important. It's like, okay, I want to go there. Then you can start making headway on that route. Trying to increase your brain's capacity, trying new things that challenge you, like we talked about. And again, this is not like, oh, flip your life upside down and just overhaul it, or take on 50 new things at once. Like, it's not going to work. Just try one new thing, a new hobby, a skill, a language, try different routes when you're going places, try new foods. And also think about the things you need to stop doing, right? Like, there's a lot we can just stop doing. For me, for example, I learned a couple years ago, probably more than that, I was like, I can't watch TV shows because I will just binge them. Like, I just know this about myself. It's a limitation. And if there's like more than one available. And so I'm like, I'm just not watched. So I haven't watched Game of Thrones. I haven't watched like any of that stuff. And I'm okay. Like, I have survived. I'll be okay without them. The actual 4 ways, and here's what's really interesting, and this is what I learned through my Psych K training and also through Bruce Lipton. There are 4 ways to change your thought pattern. So once you figure out like, okay, here's where I want to go, here's what I want to do, these are the beliefs and the thoughts that I'd rather have. There's 4 ways to change them. Hypnosis, which I didn't know till now, because hypnosis works because you put your conscious brain to sleep and your subconscious brain is running. So when you see people do that, I'm like, oh my God, like I had no idea that's what they're doing. Like it really does work. If you can get the conscious brain to shut off. Repetition or practicing. So whatever the thought or behavior or habit is, like that's where affirmations come in. Like I'm sure you guys are very familiar. Affirmations are very big in society. But you can say anything like, when I run, like I would create them. And I just did this the other day because I was like really struggling. And I was like, my legs feel light, and I breathe deeply, right? So you make affirmations in the positive present sense, or you can do them for anything. I am attracting everything that I want, or I am satisfied with my life, or anything. I have a list of them. If you want them, just message me. But practice and practice repeating. So kids, again, it's not just reading the book or writing the affirmation one time, it's doing it over and over and over. And Joe Dispenza talks about this a lot. I like Abraham Hicks as well, if you're looking for resources. And I will give you a little secret on this. There's 5 different brainwave states, right? From like waking at our like highest peak to like deep, deep sleep. The best one to intake new information and kind of reset some programs is at the theta brainwave state. That's when you're waking up or falling asleep, or you're in a deep meditative state. So if you want to like play something like for a long time, I'm not doing it at this recently, but I've done it for a long time, like play stuff when I go to bed at night. And then now when I wake up in the morning, I'm meditating. I put on the 15 meditation immediately. And that's the first thing I do. The third way to make changes in your thought patterns is energy psychology. So like Seikei, like the thing that I am now certified in, EFT, if you guys have heard about that, that's emotional freedom technique. So it's like tapping, if anyone's familiar with that. Energy therapies, and there's like 20 or 30 other modalities for energy psychology. And then the 4th way is high impact events, which you are very hard to kind of control. If you go to like a life-changing conference or a retreat or something like that, that can really just kind of knock you into a different place. But high impact events can also shift in negative ways. So that's less of a controllable, but that is one. And then the last thing I'll share are getting other ways to help you get into like change thought patterns or getting into whole brain states. So a lot of times, and this is part of this like K training that I did, a lot of times your left brain and right brain aren't talking to each other. And so it's like, oh, let's make sure they're communicating, right? And you can do this thing. And so anytime you cross over, like and I don't know if this is reversed for you guys or not, but this is my right hand and I'm going to touch the left side of my body. Anytime you cross over from your left to right side, you're engaging both hemispheres of your brain. So if there is an affirmation or something that you want to take in and you're saying it and repeating it, if you do it while doing this, or there's a cool thing called brain gym. I didn't make this up. This is on the internet somewhere if you Google it, but you can tap your, I'm standing right now, but you can't see my knee. So you can like tap your left knee with your right hand and just like tap like this. And that's another way that you can create new thought patterns in a whole brain state, which is super important. Questions?
Yeah, because it definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or even because this is a super safe, super conversational space. If you did want to just unmute yourself or turn on your camera, you are more than happy to do so. Because I know we've covered a lot of things, especially on the how do you unlearn this autopilot technique. And I know a lot of it, at least for me, it can definitely be maybe not overbearing is the right word, but I think when you are trying to start that journey to unlearning the autopilot, I think all of these different things, I think as great as they sound, I think that if you maybe don't know them enough, or you have them all at you, it could be very intimidating, very overwhelming. So
Yes.
definitely feel free if you need any clarification on any of these things, because I think the most
Yeah.
important thing is to walk away from this conversation confident that you can start this journey to unlearning autopilot.
Totally. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, please don't like go try all of these things or like be like, I'm gonna change my life and like write down 50 affirmations and just like listen to them all day. Um, so there are so many ways that you can start. Do what resonates with you. These are just some suggestions. Like I said, pick one thing, like try one thing.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of stuff you can cut out of your life too. Like think about, I have a lot of, and I'll put my website in here when we're done, but I have a lot of like reflection tools and exercises you can go through to think about, oh, when do I actually feel my best, and what do I want to do, and how do I feel about my, and there's like a list of traits. It's like compassion, time management, gratitude, like all these things. And you can kind of take a self inventory of like, oh, how am I actually at this?
Mhm.
But no, there's so many things. So it is okay, like, to feel overwhelmed when you get started. Just have grace and compassion for yourself and know that it will get better. Like, just keep doing the things. Obviously there's many people that can help you. Like, reach out. Asking for help is not a bad thing at all, at all. And I
Yes.
actually want to, this reminded me, I wanted to ask you, Jasmine, a little bit about your story, because you said, and you shared with me offline,
Mhm.
like 5 or 6 months ago, you would have considered yourself very negative.
Yes, definitely. I think just, and definitely won't make this super long or anything, but I think just with certain experiences I've lived, I think I just had always had this fight or flight, pessimistic, always on guard type of feeling. I was so much nervous, anxious energy all of the time. And I think I just got to this point, and not to be corny or anything, because I know we are talking with Lo, but Mike McCaff, Sydney Duarte, the power team that actually helped me put together this unlearning series. The more I spoke with them, and the more that they were talking about these type of concepts of just the self-actualization journey and this unlearning autopilot, it really clicked in my head that I was like, I really am feeding into the status quo. I am really living by how society told me I should think, how I should act, how I should talk. Why? What is the point? It's not
Mhm.
clearly not making me happy. So, to Lowe's point, I think I just finally stepped back for a second, and I was like, I'm doing all of these things because I think I should be doing these things, because this is what I'm accustomed to. This is what society has ingrained in me. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to partake in it. And as Lo mentioned, 5, 6 months ago, I was super pessimistic. But the first thing that I did, because all of these things, because I had Lo sending me all of these resources, and I actually love Abraham Hicks. So thank you for the plug. And then Sydney was sending me all of these things, and Mike was sending me all of these things, and it was so overwhelming. I loved all the love, but I was like, I don't know where to start. And if you also feel that way, I promise you this: the one thing that I started doing is I started calling myself out. If I was having a negative thought, or I was being negative towards a certain person, or just towards myself, I would say to myself, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to be negative. This is only hurting me. This is hurting no one else around you. Why do it? So call yourself out completely. And I know it sounds kind of silly to do. And even if you have to say it out loud just to really put it out there, call yourself out. Don't allow yourself to be negative anymore, because you are the person that controls you at the end of the day. And Mike McCaff, shout out, love the man. He said one thing, and it is amazing if you are also someone that is super pessimistic. Um, it is better to be less negative than it is to be more positive. So if you struggle with being negative all of the time, it is so important that you check yourself on that negativity first before you start being like, okay, I have to be a rain of sunshine. I have to be smiles all the time. I have to be perky. I have to be happy, because that's going to drain you of your energy. Unlearn your negative connotations in your brain first, in your subconscious first, then start working on being more positive.
Yeah, it's yes. And I will say that is a huge, huge point. And it's less about, yeah, being the ray of sunshine. And it's more just the simple things like, sorry, I almost swore. I don't know if we're allowed to on this call. I hate yard work, right? It's like I'm doing yard work because it makes me happy to see, right? Or because it gives, because it's allows my kids to play outside or something, like finding a reason behind it. Like it can be neutral even, but it's replacing the negative thoughts that you're having with less negative or neutral ones, and then slowly like working your way up to potentially more positive thoughts. And this is not about toxic positivity. I'm not about that. That is not helpful. And it's not like, oh, just be an optimist all the time. No, it's more about, okay, what can I don't think we talked about this yet, but okay, can I control this thing? Yes or no? If yes, cool. Change something about it, do something. If I can't control it, I only have the option to change my attitude about it. That is it. Those are our options. It's very stoic principles. I talk about that in a lot of my workshops. Having that mindset of like, there are things that I can't control. And so like, what is the point in complaining about that? And there's a difference between processing and complaining. If I call you up and I'm like, hey, like, I just need to talk through something. I'm just really not sure how to deal with this or react to it or handle it, right? That's processing versus just like, woe is me, everything sucks, my life sucks. Like, like that is the difference.
Yeah. I see that Freeman would put
Yes.
something in the chat. So maybe talk more about the differences between routine, so ruts versus creating discipline around repeating things you mentioned. So positive growth techniques. That's a great
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Freeman. Freeman and I have been friends for years, actually, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But I think ruts, like the routine, the getting in ruts is when you have more of that negative mindset, when you're stuck in complaining or I'm trying to think of good examples, but one of my friends used to say this, and I say it all the time now. If someone says something that's like negative or disempowering, really disempowering is the best word. I'm like, well, not with that attitude. Like, of course, that's not going to happen with that attitude you have, right? But when you are stuck in a rut, which is a loop, versus doing positive things, there are very different things happening in your brain. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I can't really go in depth here, but you're essentially creating deeper ruts versus when you have positive techniques that you're using, you're creating more neural pathways, right? So negative is like, oh, I'm just digging in the same ones. When you're doing positive things continuously, you're creating more neural pathways. I was going to say one other thing about growth techniques, but it escaped me. So
It's okay. If it comes back, we'll come back to it.
oh, and thank you, Ryan, for mentioning gratitude. That is super important. I just saw your comment before he drops.
We have a question, a private question. Is
Yes.
it necessary to understand the cause of the negative, or can you address the negative without ever figuring out its source? That's a great question.
Um, no, I mean, everything that I've learned and the things that so in Psych K, which is my modality, I'm also a trained life coach. So let me just share that I've been life coaching for almost 10 years now. And this Psych K modality that I've learned has enabled me to speed up the process of things and healing like so much faster. Because a lot of our life is about mindset, right? What you believe is what you attract. Your beliefs shape your life. So do you need to, getting back to, I'll talk a little bit more about that if we have time, but getting back to, do we need to understand the root cause? No. I think if something comes at you again and again and again, and it's nagging, perhaps you went through a trauma and you need to process that potentially. But I think there are ways that you can heal that you don't need to like go down a path. If you're like, okay, I'm not good at this thing. Trying to think of a good example. I mean, I could talk about my body image. That was something that I balanced for very early on in my certification. That was something I kind of grew up with, and it stuck with me for a very long time, even though I knew all of the things, right? I was a coach. I knew all the positive affirmations to say. I knew all the right things to say, but it was still kind of nagging me underneath. And I didn't necessarily, I kind of knew where it came from, but it was less about knowing where it came from than really shifting into the belief that I wanted to have, because it won't necessarily, understanding where something came from can help you make a change, but it won't make the change for you. That, I think that's the best way I can summarize it.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think you as an individual have to make that call yourself.
Mm-hmm.
As Lo mentioned, you have two options. If it's something that is super repetitive, if this is something you have struggled with for years, then that's probably something that you need to unlearn to relearn, right? You have to be able to unpack certain things in order to get over it. But in the other sense that Lo was talking about, you don't always necessarily have to figure out, oh, why am I being so negative? Sometimes you really just have to do the work to stop, to prevent the negativity rather than trying to unpack the negativity. So I definitely think that that's really important. And I definitely just say, gauge it to, how it fits your own life. And Lo, I know there was something that you wanted to get into. I do have a question. It's a little bit off topic.
I was going to just add one. Yeah, please hold that
Okay.
and
Okay.
remember it. I want to just share one thing about triggers. So there are things, and I don't know who asked the question, but hopefully that answer. There is one more thing I want to add about triggers. So there might be something that someone does that triggers you, right? And if you're like, why does this thing trigger me? Like, why is this so triggering? That can be a very helpful question to ask to get to the root cause of it. So then you can reframe it and work on it, right? That's like, and a lot of times when people trigger us, they're either things that are really aggressively against our core values, or it's something in ourselves that we're kind of shaming ourselves for, are common reasons for triggers. So that is one way where it can be helpful to be like, okay, why am I annoyed with this person right now? Or why do I just not like this person? Digging into that and then figuring out. And that's why I said at the beginning, like healing yourself is the biggest thing, right? Like just understanding, like, my goal is to get to the level where people can, be who they are. And I'm like, okay, like, that's great. That's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, if they're not hurting anyone, that's themselves or anyone. Other than that, it's like whatever. Okay, what's your question?
So I know when you were talking first about how you realized that you were in this autopilot state, how you were kind of in a depressive or just like an anxious rut. So how have you seen the effects of your mental health affected by getting out of autopilot? Like clearly, I definitely think it's obviously, lifted the mental health and made you, I guess, less depressed or less anxious. But what are other things that you have noticed just about your own mental health, where you've unlearned this autopilot versus before you did?
Ooh, I think initially going through the coaching and therapy helped me to stop playing the victim. I mean, that was a lot of it. It helped me start to identify unhealthy behaviors and habits and create healthier ones. And just put myself in uncomfortable situations, like even just the willingness to do that. I remember when I can't remember how long exactly it was, but I moved to Denver after I started coaching, but I moved to Denver, Colorado, and I only knew maybe one or two people there. And I was like, whatever, I'm doing this. I want to do this. I want to live there. And there were events happening and I didn't have anyone to go with. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna go because I either don't go or I go. Right. And so I either have this experience or I don't. And I went in and I was like, okay, well, this might be a little uncomfortable. Okay, that's the worst that's going to happen. Like, I'm not going to die. I can go to this event and awkwardly try to make conversation with people and it'll be okay. They may respond or they may not, and then they'll get to have this experience, right? And so I don't know if that's answering your question, but I think just my ability to believe in myself and the things that I want to do, and not letting the bullshit that we let affect us come into my day. I'm like, okay, well, that's no big deal. Like, get caught in traffic. Like, all right, cool. Now I get to listen to this song or this meditation for a little bit longer, this podcast, whatever. Those are very little things, but it's just about raising my vibration to get to those levels of joy and love and happiness, right? So I think that's the biggest thing. There's a really cool scale. I don't have it, but we're vibrational beings, and everything has a vibration. So shame, negativity, grief is a little bit higher on the scale. There's neutrality. Oh, I love that, Erin. You have to be an advocate for yourself 100%. And then as you go up, there's like happiness, and then joy and love and hope are near the top, right? So it's this scale. So I think doing those things allowed me to move up and truly be a happier version of myself. And it's so much more fun and exciting to be here. Like, again, it comes back to like the amount of effort is the same. Like, being uncomfortable and being stuck sucks, right? And you know it, and you're like, ugh, like, just, especially looking back, I think you're like, God, like that was hard, and there are definitely hard things about this space, but they're good problems. That was also a Taste Exchange reference from Sam Hart's episode. You want to have the best, his monk, or is it a monk? Erin, I can't remember what it was. I don't know if it's a monk or something else that he has. Okay, it is. Yay. And he was saying, everyone has problems. You want to have the best possible problems. Like, oh, I'm getting a popsicle. Like, do I pick grape or cherry? Right? Like, that's a way better problem than, lots of bad problems out there that I can't think of right now.
As kind of like a follow-up to the question. So now that you're in more of this, what would you consider this like state? Would you consider it your higher state? How do you consider like present you right now?
Oh, I think I'm more in alignment than I have ever been. Like, when I say alignment, I mean like mind, body, spirit, higher self, depending on what you believe, but like being in alignment to be present, like that, like you said, present state, but like it is being present. That's a big part of it. So, I mean, do I think I'm in my highest state? No, because this is a lifelong journey and there's lots more shit I'm going to learn. Because if I look back 10 years ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, and hopefully if I'm doing things right, I'm doing something of that too, although I'm pretty like proud of where I am right now. So,
would you say that you ever still struggle with either depressive states or anxious states, and like even in like your feel good mood now, like are those still things that you still find yourself having to combat?
Oh, 100%, because it's life, right? And it's like external events come at us. This is something that Abraham Hicks talks about. So this is not necessarily like my own thought, but I'm kind of combining it with my own. It's when external events happen or other people come to us, being able to maintain your alignment and whatever state you're in, no matter what happens, right? So that is kind of what I'm working on right now. And things are going to happen, of course, and I'm still learning, right? Like, and it's again going to be a lifelong process, but hopefully the more and more that I'm working on this and repeating these things as a good pattern, when outside events happen, I'm like, okay, and I don't think that means like shutting off grief or sadness. It's saying I can welcome that in as well, but not just like shutting out everything. So it's welcoming in all the emotions and acknowledging, okay, here's where I am right now. And it's moving through those things, not trying to like skip over them. And that's like that toxic positivity. So when things do come up and you're like, ooh, that kind of knocked me off a bit, like, okay. And then it's getting curious, like, okay, why did that knock me off? Okay, cool. And then you have the tools, like I have all the tools and the resources that I can say like, okay, here's how I get back to that state that I was at. Again, it's not saying like, oh, it's be happy all the time. It's not about that. It's more
Right.
like understanding that you have no control over outside events. All you can control is this thing right here.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful because I think a lot of people, and I don't know if anyone on the call has, but I know I definitely have been the type of person that, let everything get to me, every minor inconvenience or major inconvenience. It would just, I wouldn't only just welcome it into me, I would let it consume me. And that is the biggest issue, I think, is just letting those terrible experiences or those depressive or anxiety feelings consume you. So what piece of advice do you have to people that struggle with that, with having those type of things consume them, full on, rather than just like, okay, I'm welcoming it, I understand it, I'm processing it, but this is not going to control me? What piece of advice do you have to people that struggle with that on the daily?
Well, there are, so obviously, like depending on your life and what kind of traumas you have been through, you're going to have different levels of depression or potentially disorders. And so there's different ways that you obviously want to treat those. I'm not a doctor or a licensed therapist, so I don't want to like speak to those, but I'd say treat them with loving kindness and ask for help. Like there are people out there that can help you. And that's the biggest thing, right? It's like, okay, if something is happening to me right now, becoming aware of it, is it just, and there's a difference, right? There's a difference between I broke up with someone or I got fired or someone died, than like a deep depression or having some kind of disorder. So
Mhm.
I think for those things that I just named, it's more like, okay, can you maintain your vibrational alignment? If you have something else going on, I think there's a deeper level of care that is needed.
Yep.
But for most people, if they're just kind of talking about these life things that happen and like, oh, this affected me so much, it's putting it into perspective. Like, is this going to matter in 5 years from now? Which I know is such a stupid question when you think like, yes, it like sucks, especially when you're young because you have no perception. But I think we can teach that a little bit more to kids if we have these greater awarenesses. I really do believe it comes down to your perspective and just owning yourself and knowing I cannot control those things. What I can control is my reaction, letting the emotions move through and holding space for both things at once. Like if someone passes away, being super sad that they're gone and being happy that they're in a better place, if that's what you believe, and or being happy about the ways that they impacted your life.
Yeah.
It's not saying, oh, I need to pick one or the other. You can have both. And so I think that's maybe, does that answer your
Yes,
question? I don't
that
know.
last
Okay.
part I think was really great. Is just recognizing that you can have both emotions and it doesn't have to be
Yeah.
all or nothing.
Yeah. And I
I
remember breakups that I've gone through where I'm like, I'm sad, but I'm also happy because I know this is the right thing.
Yeah. Yep. I know that we are coming to time. So last piece of advice. What is a piece of advice that you give to the people listening in right now or the people that will come and listen to it later? What do you want people to walk away with today? What is the most important thing that you want people to hear?
I think it was something that we started out with, and it's if you do not direct your brain, it will direct you in whatever ways that you have been operating or the programs that you have. And so, learning to just become more aware, be open, have compassion for yourself and others, man, that's big. And just commit to lifelong healing mostly and growth, because I think with healing comes growth.
That's awesome. Beautiful. Virtual round of applause for Lo. Virtual
Thank you
hugs.
guys.
Yes. Thank you so much,
Hugs to
Lo.
everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us and just having this conversation. It's been really helpful, and I hope everyone walked away today picking up some feedback or some just things to help them with their own journey to getting off of autopilot. So I don't want to say it for you, but but I think you may be okay with this. If you have any struggles, or if there was something that you really resonated with tonight on tonight's call, and you just want to learn more, or you have questions, feel free to private message me, Lo. I won't. Is that okay with you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
100%.
Perfect. Yeah. So just feel free, like if you have more questions or follow-ups, feel free to reach out to Lo and I. Um, Definitely Lo. She's the expert in this field. But thank you so much, y'all. Yeah. And Lo, is there any other parting words that you wanna give before we get off the call?
No, thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate you. If you do, please do reach out. I obviously can do one-on-one sessions. I do workshops with different organizations. But yeah, if you are interested in Psych K, I'm telling you, it is life-changing.
Perfect. All right. Well, everyone, we keep saying thank you, but thank you again. And we will see you next month, hopefully. And have a good rest of your evening.
Bye.
Bye.